on February 3rd, 2025 at 7:03 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. De Vera?
Here.
Mr. Jewett?
Here.
Mrs. Larson?
Here.
Miss Lee?
Here.
Mrs. Klingler?
Here.
Mrs. Negretti McGinley?
Here.
All right, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. We are on to the approval of meeting agenda. I need a motion for the approval of the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. De Vera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negretti McGinley?
Yes.
Motion carries. And that brings us to communications to the board. And first up is our Organic Life second presentation for the year.
Good evening. Hello. Good evening, everybody. My name is Erica Orlinski, Vice President with Organic Life, and it is an honor to be here tonight. First off, I would like to begin by just briefly reviewing the building changes that we've had this year. The EEC is now a full-day program. We've added breakfast and lunch and after-school snack this year, in addition to the AM and PM snacks, and things are going great. We're feeding the kiddos, and they're so cute, the EEC. And then, of course, at the elementary schools, things are great now. The kindergartners had a little bit of a challenge at the beginning of the year adjusting, but now everything is great and things are going very well and smoothly. As always, we have our meal counts for breakfast and lunch, August through December. As you can see, we have over 511,000 meals already served for just half the year between breakfast and lunch combined. We have snack and supper going very well. The AM and PM snacks over 17,000 snacks already, and the supper program over 21,000 snacks. Dinners, I should say, suppers. So it's incredible to feed all these students, especially the supper program, I think is wonderful for those that are staying after school for sports and clubs and everything else that they have going on. This year we had Illinois State Board of Education audit. It was a child and adult care food program, also known as the CACFP, and they were reviewing the Early Education Center. They were on site January 16 and 17. They were reviewing to make sure we were in compliance with state and federal regulations. They reviewed meal count procedures, record keeping claims, menus, meal pattern, production records, child nutrition labels, meal service, and civil rights training, and everything basically as auditors do. And I'm very pleased to note that everything was in compliance and everything went very well and smoothly. In addition to the EEC breakfast, lunch, and snack program that they were auditing, that also included the supper program as well. Yes, and the month of review was November, but on site they came out in January. Next, speaking of the Illinois State Board of Education, we received a grant for the school breakfast expansion program, and with that, there was a training required. So we had our very own Jose Gutierrez and Organic Life Jose, and also Joe Bailey. At the time in October, they went to visit the Joliet Junior College, and it was truly an incredible experience. They allowed 2 people to attend the training, and they were just on site. Their culinary kitchen is really incredible. I was there, I think it was last year, and it's really outstanding. And they got to prepare some fun treats for breakfast, and that ideas and recipes that we can bring over here to the Round Lake School District. So that's really cool and fun. Along with that, there was a training and some sessions about breakfast and how you can really increase your breakfast program in your school. So with that, with the grant, we were able to bring breakfast carts to our schools, the 7 schools listed over here. And this is an example of what the breakfast cart looks like. So very colorful. It shows the students the options, and it's definitely a nicer look for the students for breakfast in our buildings. So we're very thankful for that. Next, we have the Panther Work Program, and we're very thankful for our student, Erin, our transition student, who comes out every single day over at the high school, and he helps for a period to help make pizzas, and it's just wonderful that he's able to help work with us. In addition, we're very grateful for our Murphy employee, Natalie. As you may be aware, she helped save a student who was choking, and she performed the Heimlich maneuver. And we are incredibly honored to have such amazing people in our community, especially one of our very own employees. And I really couldn't believe this story when I heard it. So we're very thankful for that and for her. And we always talk about how wonderful our Organic Life employees are. And I just wanted to highlight that once again. And some catering fun, as we always have fun over here. Some pictures of Mickey's holiday party, the Winter Spectacular. So you can see over there some fun things that we do. And speaking of our Organic Life staff, this is a picture of the ladies over at the high school having some fun. And again, you know, they're all part of the community, so I think that just makes it extra special. And coming up, so we have strawberry milk for Valentine's Day, which is truly such a treat for the kids. They really love it. So we're excited to bring that back for Valentine's Day. This year, we've decided, in place of the pizza challenge that we've had for several years, we're changing it up, and we're going to have a pasta challenge. So we're excited about that. We're thinking, I believe, in April, possibly during National Mac Day. So we thought that would be fun and different, and it's always fun. So more to come at the next board update that we have for you. And the EEC new kitchen will be ready soon, and we're excited about that. And we will also continue with focus groups, which we always do with the students because we love to get their feedback. Anything that we could do to make things better and help increase participation. As always, thank you for the opportunity to serve meals in your district. It is truly, honestly, an honor, and it is an incredible school district, so we're so happy to be here. And please let us know if you have any questions.
Any questions, anybody?
Oh, 500,000 meals is a lot of meals. What I'm looking for, though, is what would help is just to provide some context. Is that more than what we've done, less than what we've done? I just need, so for me, it's helpful if I go, okay, are these, my wife will come home and say, I spent this much, I got this such and such for this much. I don't have any context. I don't know, is that a good deal? Is that a bad deal? Did we save $1? Did you overshoot, right? All of that sort of thing. So I'm just looking for some sort of context or comparison in terms of any of those, including, like, I'd love to hear how the school breakfast expansion grant, did that make in impact. So it's just where are the impacts? That would be helpful.
Absolutely. We can update you at the next food service update with a comparison maybe from last year to this year.
Whatever metrics you're also using to say, are we on track, right? That would help us. But yeah, any sort of comparison.
How about, in addition to that, we could actually get the numbers at this point in the year and send them in a weekly? And then in the next presentation, we'll make sure we put last year, this year. Does that sound, so we can just work with you, Erica, to get those numbers?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I have a question as well.
Yes.
The school breakfast expansion grant, that is only good till the end of this school year, correct?
We believe so, yes, for this school year.
I'm sorry, was that a yes or a no?
Yes.
So would we be applying for this grant again for the next school year?
So I can actually take that if you'd like, because I can see you're like, hey, we don't actually apply for that grant. So that's actually done in the finance department, and that hasn't been released whether or not they're going to be continuing that grant for next year. That should be coming out in April. And that at that time is when we would determine whether or not we'll be applying for the grant. I will say that it was only a $10,000 grant, and when you send 2 people to Springfield to go to a training in order to get the grant, we have to be really mindful of what we're spending just to get $10,000. So we'll be taking all of that into account as we take a look at the allotments when they release those at that time, which again should be mid-April is when we'll know whether or not that grant is continuing, and we would have to reapply.
Okay, and we'll inform the board.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear the learnings from that, because sometimes a grant or a one-time grant, we may not be able to use that for next time, but there will be some learnings from that. That'd be great to hear that. You already got them. That's great.
Sorry. So for this year for the grant, obviously the recipe part of it was a fun part. It's kind of the stuff they do to reel you in, but there's a whole section on compliance that we did to make sure that we're compliant, not just with the grant, but with continuing breakfast program, and making sure that within staying with those compliance parameters, we're able to increase participation. So that was basically what we took away from it. Well, what I took away from it, because I was pretty much the one that needed to take something away from it. But basically on strategies on how to increase breakfast participation, things like making grab-and-go sites more readily available, with the stigma of kids not wanting to come all the way down for a breakfast, or sometimes, especially high schools, middle schools, they don't have time, they're running late. Making sure that grab-and-go sites are readily available for them, that's something that's been a testament to us increasing our participation. So one of the main things is people always do in those training sessions is ask us, what can we do for you guys? And what we always hear from other peers is just more education for communities and parents so that they understand the program and why we serve what we serve. And it's not just because it's a company or a school policy, it's a USDA policy that we have to stay within certain parameters. So it's working with them to get information out, not just to us, but to the communities as well, so they understand the program.
I just wanted to thank you for the supper program, because there are times when my kids are after school and they would not be able to eat just because they won't be able to come home, and I worry about it a lot. So it's been a game changer. Also, my 11-year-old goes to RLAS and fully takes credit for the strawberry milk for Valentine's Day. So he'd like to thank you for his idea that he presented to Mr. Guwalka. He was like, yes, I created that idea. No, but thank
We
you.
get that request, and unfortunately, the milk companies, very few, kind of monopolized, and they only make that strawberry milk during Valentine's Day, or else we'd serve it all the time. But yeah.
It really is a treat for the kids, so I'm so excited to see their face light up, and hopefully more kids will come through and grab lunch with the strawberry milk.
Any other questions Eye in the sky, any other questions?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much for dinner tonight. That was very, very nice. That was awesome. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks. All right, and moving on to winter student achievement presentation.
All right, thank you for having us this evening. This is going to be a pretty lengthy presentation, which there's a lot of meat in here, a lot of new data. So I really feel it's important that we take some time, explain it, because it's the first time that Casey and myself have presented using iReady data. So we've practiced a lot and gone through it ourselves and really done our best to be prepared. And then we also have Jeff with us. Jeff D is the associate principal at the high school to speak to the ACT and all the different great changes that we made in regards to academics at the high school. So diving in, for our agenda this evening, we're going to go into just an overview of the iReady assessment. Casey will take a couple of slides to give you kind of an introduction to what is reported on the iReady assessment. Then we'll dive more into the specifics of the fall to winter iReady student achievement. And we're going to look at really two big areas of how they report out on the data, one of them being placement distribution. And we'll talk about how they talk about placement compared to how MAP talks about placement. And then progress towards typical annual growth, and then progress towards this annual stretch growth, and kind of what's the difference between typical and stretch. And then, like I mentioned, wrapping up with Jeff to really highlight some of the successes and things going on at the high school in regards to student achievement.
Good evening. This is a brief overview of the iReady assessment growth. So the iReady assessment is a web-based adaptive test. It's similar to MAP in that nature. It measures a student's reading and math skills. It's currently only adaptive for English reading and English and Spanish math. We're expecting the Spanish reading assessment to become adaptive this coming fall. The process. So
Can I stop you real quick?
Yeah.
Do you know what adaptive is? Board. Can you just explain what that is, please?
So as a student is taking the assessment, as they're answering questions correctly or incorrectly, the test will monitor the level that the student is receiving the questions at. So it'll provide them with a variety of grade level or questions tailored to specifically how they're responding and answering questions correctly or incorrectly.
So the test changes based on, oh, that's cool.
It is cool. We're very much looking forward to the Spanish reading assessment becoming adaptive this fall. So the process in which our students go through and how they get these growth scores. So a student takes the initial baseline diagnostic in the fall. They receive what's called a scale score for reading and math. The scale score is measured on a scale of 100 to 800, and their score reflects the skills that they've mastered up to that point. From there, the scale score, students are given a placement level. So these are the two types of performance or growth that we're going to talk about tonight. They receive an overall placement level, which is observed on this column on the left-hand side. There's 5 different placements a student can achieve. And then based on that current placement level and their current grade level, they're given growth goals that are set to either typical growth or stretch growth. The typical growth value is the average annual growth of students at each grade level and placement level. It shows how a student is growing compared to the average student growth at the same grade and placement level. So when we had MAP was normed at each data point so that we could see like what a first grader at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year looked like. iReady is different in that it's measuring how a student is performing based on their current grade level at the end of the year expectations. So when we're assessing a student in first grade in the fall, it's measuring them on where are they performing in line with where they should be at the end of the year in their current grade level. Okay. So then it also measures stretch growth, which is the recommended growth that puts students on a path towards proficiency. It's not saying it's a higher goal or higher expectation that's putting students towards advancement. So when we're looking at students that might need catch up or that might need a little bit of intervention, this is the goal that we would aim for to help students catch up to where they need to be. The expectations with typical growth nationally is that 75% of students in a year would typically achieve their annual growth. And for a stretch growth, about 25 to 35% of students achieve their stretch growth goal for the year. When we look at the typical growth, it's based on a 50% percentile normed, and then the stretch growth is set at the 80th percentile range. Again, these are the three areas we're going to review with you tonight. There are many ways you should know that you can view iReady data. These are the three main areas that we focus on at the district and the school level. There is the overall placement, the annual typical growth, and the annual stretch growth. The first data set that you'll see by number 1 is the overall placement. This is the student growth measure that's, again, year-long rather than in separate testing windows. So we're looking at how a student is performing based on where they should be at the end of their current grade level. And there are 5 levels of placement, starting from the right with the 3 kind of shaded red is 3 or more grade levels below. Moving over to the red, 2 grade levels below. Yellow is 1 grade level below. Green is early on grade level. And then the green with the slashes are mid to above grade level. Again, yeah, go.
Can I ask so it's actually in the last slide. I'm still kind of processing. So comparing the fall to the spring, it's actually not against like a set level. It's actually the level of what would be the change, if I understand this right. Is it the level that what would be the change, the difference between fall and spring? So if you have a student that is growing, it's actually the comparison is against the student where they would enter in the fall and where a student would leave in the fall. It's the comparison to that, not just this is the bucket of knowledge that they should achieve. Is that correct, or is it the bucket of knowledge?
It's the bucket of knowledge. So it's the end of the year expectation. So if I'm a 4th grader, it's measuring me against where I should be at by the end of 4th grade.
Which is actually more than what you should be at the beginning of 4th grade. Yep. So it is actually, it's still, there's a measurement of an increased, so there's an expectation of increased knowledge. So in other words, if somebody does, so if somebody is, so if they are, let's say 30%, doing like 30% in the spring, but they're actually in the 50%, which is an improvement, it's actually like an exponential improvement because they didn't just slide up the scale, they actually slid up the scale at a faster velocity than if they had just kind of stayed with it, right? Do I have this?
Yes, you've got it. And you'll see that as we work through the placement levels, we monitor the placement levels and then we monitor their growth towards typical progress and then towards their stretch progress to make sure students are progressing. Okay, so those placement levels, there are the 5 placement levels. So similar to what you were asking, Mr. Jewett, if I am, this is also retraining our teachers thinking too and how we look at data, very much so. So if I'm, again, a 4th grade student and I'm placing in the yellow, which is 1 grade level below at the beginning of the year, that's actually okay because that means I'm ready for the content for that grade level I'm entering, okay? The next 2 pieces of data we're reviewing again are the annual typical growth and the annual stretch growth. So when we're looking as a district or school level, we are looking at the annual typical growth, which is the median progress by building. And the median progress by building and grade level is the percentage of students meeting annual typical growth. So how iReady reports this out again is vastly different from MAP. So when I'm looking at column 2 at the annual typical growth, I'm looking at the median progress of that building. So the percentage you see is actually, if I were to line up that entire building and I pick the middle student, that is the progress that they are making towards their annual typical growth, the median progress. So that means half of my students in my school are performing below that range, half are performing above that range. iReady data for annual stretch growth is again in column where the number 3 is. It's the median progress by building. So that's that more ambitious goal that we want to see students growing more than expected. And they report it out in that median, which means again, you're lining up students and it's that middle students. So half of the students are performing below that percentage, half of the students are performing above that percentage. Then we also have the percentage met, which are students who have already met their annual typical growth that's set for the whole year, and the average, the percentage met for stretch growth for the whole year already. So we do have students already achieving their full growth. iReady data is unique in that you have to view everything holistically. So we review typical growth and stretch growth progress to evaluate if instruction, enrichment, or intervention is working up to this point. Has what we've done paid off? Are we seeing improvement in areas that we're trying to intervene on or enrich? And then overall placement is used to determine what are our next steps. So if students are not progressing or changing placement levels, what are we doing to help support students? And vice versa, if students are progressing, how do we keep them on that trajectory of improvement?
Okay, one thing I want to call out too, when you're looking at the column on that chart that speaks to the annual typical growth and the progress towards the median, iReady does recommend that we're looking for that number because we're halfway through the school year to be at 50%. Okay, so when we're seeing numbers a little bit above that, that's a good thing because the median is sliding us a little bit further, closer towards that 100. It's also important to note that kids can exceed 100 here. You could go beyond the expected amount of growth. So that median really could be kids performing really high or students all the way down at that, 1% of growth. So it's important to show there could be like a huge range here, and you'll see some different variations in there. For a second now, I'd like to turn, there was an attachment in board docs to the parent that each of you have at your seats, to the parent report. And I'm going to leave the slide that's up here right now so you can see a little bit of the similarities of what a parent sees compared to what we look at from a district administrator or a building administrator or even the teacher level. Again, like Casey mentioned, we're looking at overall placement, and then we're looking at their annual typical and stretch growth. So on that handout that you have, this is a student. The little blacked out spots are where the student's name was popping into the report. So I'm going to go over some of the key terms that you can see on the bottom where it says understanding key terms, and speak to how those are connected to the graph above for parents to be able to see. And then there's that chart to the right-hand side that speaks a little bit more in specifics. So the first key term is exactly what Casey was talking about when we talk about overall placement. So students will be given those different variations in placement, either above grade level, at grade level, approaching, or needing improvement. So when you look at that graph that's up or chart up on the top there with the blue and the green, you can see the student's placement in the fall as a kindergartner was noted as approaching kindergarten. And then in the winter, they moved to at grade level kindergarten. And you can see there the different placement that's reported out for the parent. Then if you go to the right-hand side there, go to the right from the placement levels, it talks about the scale score. And the scale score is that single score. Casey talked about the range of the scores that allows us to identify and look at really those norms that are provided nationwide. And the scale score you can see in the chart above for this particular student was a 345 in the fall and moved to a 363 with an 18-point increase from fall to winter. What's really interesting then is it does speak also in the key terms to the national norms. And you can see in that chart above, it also provides the parents and families with a percentile that connect to the national norms. What's really interesting to pay attention to here is, again, this student in the fall in her placement or his placement was approaching kindergarten, but in the 57th percentile. So again, they're looking at what do we expect the kindergartner to know by the end of the year. And we lined up every kid in the country that took it. This student had performed better than 57% of the other students, but they're still not at kindergarten grade level, if that makes sense. Now, when they move to their winter score, you'll notice that yes, they're being identified now as being at grade level with a scale score of 363. However, they're only in the 41st percentile because at the very top, right above the top of the green, it says the on grade level range is 362 to 479. So this kid just made it into that on grade level. And when you talk about grade level percentiles, MAP did this as well. It's not like you have to be at 50 to be considered grade level. There's that bell curve range where you're looking between around 40-60% of kids being considered to be an on grade level student. So it's just interesting to look at how that breaks down, because the percentile looks like it went down, but now the kid's at grade level. So again, it can get tricky, but I just wanted to be able to call out for you what it looks like for a parent. We did mail these home in the fall when they first took them, so that we had them in hand and available for parents when we were talking at parent-teacher conferences. Did we mail them?
In the fall, they were backpacked home.
Yeah, that's what I thought. We did a video on it and we sent them home. I knew they got home. And then in the winter, we shared information in partnership with Sarah LeBlanc's team digitally, because parents can log into the platform and see scores that way. So the only other piece I didn't mention was that it does break down for a parent the foundational domains that are actually assessed. Again, this is a reading report. So on the right-hand side, it breaks down what particular areas in the world of teaching reading are we assessing the student on. So you have the phonological awareness, phonics, and so on. And you can see on the fall test and the winter test where the student fell. And if you flip to the back, there's even more detail for a parent. If you were trying to figure out what in the world is phonological awareness, what does this mean? It does give you a little bit of a description there to what that means, and also what that means and what your child may benefit from if you're looking to talk to the teacher about additional supports and whatnot. So again, I just wanted to be able to explain what parents see, because parents aren't going to see a lot of like the annual typical growth, and that's more us measuring how are our students moving, where do we need to provide interventions, but they do get a pretty detailed, great report to help them understand how their students are progressing through the assessment. Are there any questions on the parent report?
So approaching could be, you could be approaching like you're right here, or you could be approaching from like you're way back there, right? So either way,
Yes.
you're approaching.
It's a range for sure. Yeah. So I apologize about my cold.
Can I ask a question on the parent report?
Sure.
So this is a new format for our parents. Have we helped educate them on this?
So in order to
Or
help
have we
support,
received any feedback from them?
yeah, so in order to support parents, we first printed the fall parent reports and had them available during conferences. That way teachers could walk parents through them. We also distributed a video in English and Spanish that walked parents through what is iReady, what's the personalized pathway associated with iReady, and then what information will they receive on the parent report. We haven't had many questions from the buildings or heard from any parents about any questions about the reports yet.
Thank you.
So if we looked at this and this was our child, we would say like they're doing kind of okay, but there's some areas like we're not worried. That would be
Correct. I wouldn't be worried if this were my child. I would definitely be kind of on the ball of like, okay, you're just at grade level. So I'd be asking the teacher questions about what are we doing to help, in the particular areas where I see they're still approaching kindergarten. So we're doing fine in phonics, but what are we doing to support the phonological awareness, the high frequency words? And it really helps teachers kind of have that academic language that I feel like can be really hard, because we like to make it hard, unfortunately, I think, and trying to understand some of this stuff. So that would be my hope, is that parents can find, especially when you dive into what information on the back, that gives them even a little bit more content to dive into. All right, so we're going to dive in now to the first type of data that Casey mentioned that we are looking at as a district, which also the parents can see on the report, is where do our students fall in this placement distribution. So I'm going to take some time to just explain what is on this graph and then call out a couple of pieces at the end. The very top, you see it identifies that this is reading overall placement from fall to winter. And then those placement ranges are below in the colors, the green, the yellow, and the red. All the way to the right is a really important column for us because it specifically notes the students that have improved their placement. So they're moving from left to right, out of the red into the yellow or into the green. Then you can see you have a column for each of the schools that shows the growth from fall to winter. It's important to call out that our kindergarten students did not take the English reading assessment in the fall, so their data is not included in here. All right, so because I noted the kindergarten data wasn't included in the previous slide, we did want to call out the kindergarten reading data. They did take this assessment in the fall and in the winter. Remember, as Casey noted, this is not an adaptive assessment, so it is just a measure of where are the students in regard to that grade level. So you can see the categories there just speak to, are they either they're meeting their grade level expectations, they partially met them, or they did not meet them. It's not going to adapt to if they're above or below. And again, you can see the fall to winter scores there for the 3 schools where the kindergarten students currently are. Good news is on both of these slides, you can definitely see the movement of students moving from left to right, moving into a higher level of students being in the green or in the yellow. So then this next slide is our math data, exactly the same exactly the same representation that we saw in the reading data, where you have the different placement levels across the top, and then the schools down the left-hand side with that fall to winter comparison. You will see that the numbers aren't as drastic in math in the sense of when we looked at our reading data, if I flip back there to the percentage of students, you see numbers in that right-hand column in the 30s and the 40s. Of students that are moving and improving their placement. Whereas when we look at the math data, we're looking at more, at our primary buildings, we have more students in the 20 range, and then we move into the 30s and 40s. I do want to call out that where it's blacked out there for Beach and Murphy is specifically because that category of students have to be 3 grade levels or below. That's not possible at Beach or Murphy because they only go to 2nd grade. I do think it's also very important, Casey noted this when she started this evening talking about placements, that the yellow had been for all of us like a major training piece for teachers and for administrators, because we don't want to panic about the yellow and include the yellow in the students that we're really focusing intervention on. Not that we don't want to keep an eye on them, make sure that they're progressing, but again, that means the kid was ready for the grade level they're in, they just haven't learned it all yet, which is a normal expectation for students. So we really spend our time, what I love about this is it pushes teachers to look at the red and the green. We spend a lot of time on the red because our numbers are higher in the red than we would like them to be, but we spend a lot of time there focusing on how to support kids and looking at intervention. But this really helps teachers look at the green and where do they need to extend and enrich for our kids. There has been a linking study done that connects the brighter green all the way to the left to the IAR performance. And we know that our IAR scores, we definitely need to see more students falling in the 4 and 5 range. Thank you. You're the best. And so that I just want to call out that we know we have work to do on, pushing those kids that are in the green already to continue to improve. I think that's just an important part to call out, that it's really cool for the teachers. And when the teachers dive into the reports, they see the kids' names, like they see their whole class, they know where the kid falls. And remember, the individualized learning pathway does customize to each kid. So they really can get the extra support through that. And there's also the teacher toolbox where the teacher can assign particular activities for a kid. It's not just the computer that teachers have to depend on to do that. They can also do some level of support as well. So the next piece I want you guys to take a look at was Heather had originally shared in the weekly on Saturday, I believe, but it's also uploaded in Board Doc. It was the pretty triangle document that you all received. I wanted to pay special attention and help explain a little bit better the difference between how we're viewing this in iReady compared to MAP. Because when I look at it and say, holy cow, I'm looking at McGee in the winter, 45% of our students that are 3 grade levels below, or 43% at Round Lake Middle, what in the world are we looking at here? That looks like that is a large number of students. Again, remember, the 1 grade level below means they're ready for that grade level. So we're really thinking that the kids are 1 grade level below in the lighter red or 2 or more in the darker red, but that still is a very large percentage. So in digging into this data, Casey and I, in partnership with Katie Wishaw, Katie is our math and MTSS coordinator, and she is all things branching minds. She brought us to thinking about, this is a regular report that you have in front of you that our buildings look at when they're doing multi-tiered system of support meetings, and they're paying attention to how are our kids moving within intervention, and it's called a tier movement report. So on the top of the document, I provided an explanation of how our tiers fall. We look at students that are 10th percentile or below to be considered tier 3, which would mean they need much more intensive supports. If they are falling in tier 2, that's going to be the range between the 11th and 25th percentile. And then research says that students that are performing 26th percentile and above, that their needs can be met in the classroom with tier 1 curriculum from the classroom teacher and differentiated instruction. So what's really cool about this report, this is like, administrator getting nerdy excited about data reports, but I think it's pretty cool. We can filter here. You see on the top left that it is filtered for reading data, and then it's filtered to John T. McGee Middle School. And the triangles you have on the left, that was students at McGee on September 30th. And the data that is being represented here is broken down by those percentiles based on their MAP data from last spring. Now, because iReady was brand new this year, we didn't have the integration of iReady data going right away into the system in September, but we had it in there by winter. So what's really nice for us to be able to see then, if you move to the right, is as of January 31st at McGee, these students now in the winter took the iReady test. So you can see the change in the triangle from when they took the MAP to when they took the iReady, and you can see that we're not talking about a significant change of like way more students need support this year than they did last year. But it's just a great report, and you can dive down into this at a student level, but from an overview, this is really helpful for a building administrator and their MTSS team to be looking at how are our kids moving. I think it's important to call out, I'll just go through the top chart and then you guys can read through the rest of them. But with McGee, they had, at tier 3, they had 21%, and that moved down to 17. That's what you want to see. But then tier 2, you see an increase. They went from 23 to 33. So that could be students moving out of tier 3. But it also is definitely going to be some of those tier 1 kids moving up. So tier 1 went from 54% of the kids down to 49. You really don't want to see that tier 1 go down. You want to see the bigger green, right? It is important when you look at those individual triangles on the bottom, those are just helping the building see where did the kids move from. So in the fall, there were 315 in tier 1. Where did they land in the winter? So it just helps us it shows us where they moved to. And I want to call out the box over on the right-hand side that is important to note that there were 28 new students that transferred in. Okay, so that's important to know. That between there, they got 28 new students. And all of us know that when a child moves into a new school in the middle of the school year, you can't necessarily expect that test to be the greatest. There could be social emotional things there. There might be academic things, but you really got to give that kid a chance to assimilate to the new school. So it would be worth at a building level figuring out, are these 28 kids some of our kids that maybe jumped into tier 2 or even at tier 3? To kind of pay attention to that. And you can see the same data below, but represented for Round Lake Middle. The only thing I want to call out for Round Lake Middle is they had 50 students transfer in. If you recall, Round Lake Middle has our newcomer program, so it is pretty likely based on the life experiences of those students that they're potentially going to be falling more likely into tier 2 or tier 3. And they did have a little more flat data when I looked between tier 2 and tier 3. And then the back of this handout has the exact same information, but with math data, so you can see. And again, the goal here was to help you see that MAP was looking straight at percentiles, which I don't think translates very well for the general public or to parents. Like, I think it's harder to understand, whereas iReady using the placement of like, okay, my kid's at grade level, my kid's 1 grade level below, helps you understand as a parent, like, is this like urgent? What do you mean my kid's behind? It helps give a little bit more context to that in like a more understandable fashion. But I was hopeful that this would help to kind of explain that that range is still the same as what we saw in MAP. It's just presented in a different way. So is there any question on placement data? Okay, we're going to keep moving. Of course, you can come back to that if something pops in your head, no problem. Now we're going to speak to the second and third type of data that Casey had mentioned, which was the progress towards annual, typical, and stretch growth. So Casey had a chart very similar to this on the slide she went through. So I'm going to go through and call that out, that on the left-hand side you have all of the schools. Then in the middle you have the annual typical growth with the progress and median, and you can see where each of the schools fell, anywhere from 44% being our median, all the way up to 76% being the median for, again, this is reading data. And then you can see the percentage of students that met already that entire year of annual typical growth. And that ranged anywhere from 18% all the way up to 44%. And then to the right, you see that annual stretch growth and the same numbers of how many have made that progress towards the median, and then how many students, or what's the percentage of students that met. So in this particular set of data with reading by the buildings, the one thing I wanted to call out is our intermediate buildings and Round Lake Middle. So if you look at Indian Hill, Village, and Round Lake Middle, I recognize that Ellis does also have intermediate, but we wanted to call out specifically Village, Indian Hill, and Round Lake Middle, because being at 76, 72, 71, if you recall, iReady would tell us we want to see kids at the 50th, or we want to see our median be at around 50, means we're halfway there. That's pretty exciting to see, and some data that we definitely were celebrating, because there's some great progress there within those three schools. Not that the other schools didn't have good progress as well, but that was definitely worth calling out. So at this point, Casey's going to dive a little bit more into like individual grade levels.
Okay, so this slide reviews our K2 building and grade level progress towards typical and stretch growth. This breaks down the prior slide, but focusing solely on our K2 buildings and looking at each grade level independent of each other. Our K2 buildings show an overall increase in percentage of annual growth students make as they move between the grade levels. So from kindergarten to first grade, we see an increase, first grade to second grade, and you'll see when we get to intermediate on the next slide, we see that pattern continue. So progress in reading is apparent. It's also there's notable outliers in performance that have a higher level of median progress toward annual typical growth. At kindergarten at Beach, we see a 59% median progress, whereas at Ellis and Murphy, the range was in the 30s. And then again, first grade at Ellis was another outlier where students in first grade were performing at that 50% range, whereas the other first grade were in the 40% range. Some considerations, just something interesting when I'm looking at data is I'm looking at how many classrooms are in a data set. So it's important to note that Beach does have more kindergarten classrooms. There's 5 monolingual kindergarten classrooms inclusive of 1 instructional room, whereas Ellis has 2 and Murphy has 3. First grade Beach has 6 monolingual classrooms inclusive of 2 instructional, whereas Ellis has 2 and Murphy has 5, which also is encompassing of our lab program, our primary lab program. And then at second grade, Beach has 5 again, inclusive of 1 instructional room, whereas Ellis has 2 and Murphy has 4 classrooms. Moving on to our intermediate grade level progress towards typical and stretch growth for reading. In the intermediate buildings, an overall increase in the percentage of annual median growth students make throughout their grade levels again is observed. So from kindergarten to first, first to second, second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth, we see that increase continue, which is exciting. Each grade level also has one outlier, which is discrepant in performance. So we see third grade at Ellis is a little bit discrepant from the other 2 third grades across the district. Fourth grade at Village and fifth grade at Ellis are the discrepancies between the performance levels. And some considerations to keep in mind when we're looking at our intermediate or 3 through 5 data is that we have departmentalization differences between some of the buildings. So in our 4th and 5th grade, students are departmentalized, and there's differences in how many teachers teachers there are within departmentalization. An example of that is we have singleton teachers at RLAS in 4th and 5th grade. So that means that we have one teacher teaching ELA, one teacher teaching math, one teaching science and social studies. And at Indian Hill, we have a 2-teacher dual model. And at Village, we have 2 sets of ELA teachers, 2 sets of math teachers, and then 2 dual classrooms as well. So there's differences between the building that we'll keep an eye on the data to track to see if one model is working potentially better than the other.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I'm in the intermediate grade level progress. I'm that same. So I'm trying to understand. I'm slow. So it says grade 3. I mean, that's 52% of the students are on track, with the rest of the students, over half of the students are on track in learning with the rest of the country.
Yeah, so that's saying that if I line up all of my 3rd graders at Ellis, if I'm focusing at Ellis, the 52% is that middle student in that line. Half of the students are performing above the 50th percentile, which we want to see, and half are performing below and are in need of remediation, potentially.
Something to think about, board, and I want you to keep going, but after the presentation, if any of you wanted to carve out individual time with the team just to sit and talk about how to interpret the data, we'd be happy to do that. Don't you love how you just volunteered your time to the board?
No, I love it. I'd be all about it because Casey and I are like, where do we stop and where do we begin? Because there's so much, so it would be no problem.
And we've done that before. If you remember, we did the school designations. I mean, that's hard to kind of get into the weeds at a board meeting, but we are happy to do that. So if that's of interest to you, board, let me know and I'll coordinate contact with the team and we'll sit and meet with you. So
Was this your gentle nudge to stop asking so many details?
not at all. Absolutely not. In fact, no. We want you to ask questions. No, We have kind of the 15-minute rule for presentations, but with this one, we knew it was gonna go longer. So no, I know that's so, we appreciate your generosity, but we want you to ask questions during the meeting.
No, Mr. Jewett, I work in a school district. That's being voluntold by your boss.
All right, we'll move now. We'll continue in the reading data, but we're going to look specifically here at middle school. It's important at middle school to call out that I think we're seeing definitely more discrepancy across grade levels. If you look at McGee versus Round Lake Middle 6th grade, that is pretty close at 47 and 50. But then when we move into the 7th and 8th grade piece, McGee being at 35, but Round Lake Middle jumps all the way to 67. And then McGee in 8th grade is at 47, and Round Lake Middle is all the way at 92%. Okay? The part that I might get this wrong, and will attempt to explain it, and Casey might have to jump in for me, the part that is crazy in my brain when I'm thinking numbers is then if you pay attention to that 8th grade, 47, remember, is that median. Like Casey said, you line them all up, 47% is where our median student fell in reading at McGee. But 36% of the kids have already met their annual growth. Okay, but then you look at Round Lake Middle and 92 is that median, but 49% have met for the year. So it's interesting to me, but if you remember, I said the percentage of growth can go well beyond 100. A kid could show you that they know more than the grade level and their growth could go beyond 100%. So having that ability and that progress to median be beyond 100% means you could have a really wide range, and then you might not, but yet your percentage of met might not be that different. So it's just real, that one was like crazy that you don't typically see that, but I thought it was important to call out the difference there. I do want to definitely note the considerations here in middle school of like how in the world could this have happened, right? Such a difference in growth in 7th and 8th grade. I personally think it's actually fairly easy for us to explain. Going into iReady this school year at elementary, it was very clear to outline expectations because the math curriculum is iReady. So clearly the curriculum allows opportunity to use the individualized platform, also to use the teacher toolbox. It's called out in the teacher's guide, everything in the curriculum. And even within our reading curriculum, although it's not iReady curriculum, there still is definitely time either anywhere our literacy blocks are anywhere between 120 minutes to 80 minutes of instructional time a day. So there is time where teachers are doing small group rotations, and we have set the expectation that they use the individualized learning pathway in their reading and literacy instruction in centers. When you're not doing the curriculum, you have students working in centers doing that individualized learning pathway. Plus we've pushed it out, of course, to families to encourage it at home as well. But at middle school, they only have a 43-minute period, and they already had curriculum. So we did not feel that it would have been fair to the teachers to go, hey, now you got to figure out how to fit this in too. It was more a matter of like, try this for a year, see how you can build it into your small group instruction. But we definitely could not. It would have been a massive undertaking to figure out what are we going to take out of the expected grade level curriculum to fit in a significant amount of time on the platform. I will call out, though, as you know, we do put students into an extra period of math or reading if they fall below the 25th percentile or below. Those teachers did get training on the individualized learning pathway. That was an expectation that it was used within their instruction. So there were pockets for sure in the middle school that were using it on the daily. But what we really want to dive into is what was going on at Round Lake Middle. I mean, in all honesty, they could have been running some pretty awesome contests and kids might have been doing this in science, and that's not good either. So we have to kind of figure out where exactly. We can look at minutes in the platform, we can look at time of day, we can look at what teachers are using it more, we can look at percentage of students that have completed lessons, the accuracy of the lessons. So we have a lot of work to do to dive into really what was the difference between those schools. But I mean, 92%, certainly much higher than we would have expected, but I could see why both the schools might have some differences in data there.
Two things just to gently remind the board. If you think of the IAR test that determines our designations, it's weighted significantly heavier on growth than proficiency. So focusing on growth is good. The other thing, I don't know if you remember, but McGee, which is lower here, actually scored as commendable and Round Lake didn't. Now Round Lake missed it by a couple percent. So, I mean, yeah, so I guess that's why I think looking at a single data piece is not the right thing. We need to look at IAR, we need to look at local assessments, we need to look at iReady and create this global picture of how the kids are doing and if they're moving, so.
Okay, so that was a review of the reading data, looking by building and then diving down into grade level. So now we're going to transition into math. So the exact same measurements here of looking at the annual typical and stretch growth. And you can see the percentages here in math. As we saw similar in placement when we were looking at the percentage of students that were improving their placement, that percentage was not as high in math as in reading. And you're going to see the same types of things here, where our math performance is not as strong or is not as much improvement. However, remember we talked about how that progress median score, you wanted to see that sitting around 50, right? You wanted about the kids to be at about halfway point, and we're not far off there. Like we're moving, I guess, is a point there in math, which is good to see. I do think, and I said this to staff, I went and visited all of the elementary schools and brought them some cake before winter break to celebrate. They had a rough, man, 2 brand new, some of them 3 brand new curriculum, plus SEL, plus many of them new schools. We really wanted to celebrate at the end. We shared some of this data growth with them, but I called out because, you know, we departmentalize, so we have teachers in 4th and 5th grade that only teach math. So, you know, for them it was like, oh, we didn't see as great a numbers as we do in reading. But I called out, I think it's super important to note that in reading, the skills recycle from kindergarten to 12th grade. You're going to find the main idea, you're going to look for key details, you're going to do that over and over again, but your text is going to get more challenging. Whereas in math, there's a lot of skills that are built in isolation that are 100% dependent on the previous skill from the previous grade level. And it's harder. When you have a gap to fill in math, it definitely is more of a challenge many times than it is in reading. So I was not surprised to see that we have more growth to work on in math, but I also think that that's a tougher run of it.
So what does it mean when there's the annual stretch goal? And so let's say John T. McGee, 5%, math, what does it mean? Did they just meet the overall goal, or did they meet the overall stretch goal, or what is that?
So if you were looking at McGee, are you looking at that 18%?
Well,
And the 40%?
there's 18%, there's the 5. What is
Yes,
the
okay,
5?
so-
I understand, I think, what the 18 means. I don't know what the
Yep.
5 means.
The 5% means they've met all of the expected growth for the year. For that
All
grade
of the
level.
expected stretch goal growth?
Yes, the 5% is the stretch goal, and then the 28% would be the typical growth goal that they've met.
So the 5% is probably included in the 28, right? Okay.
Yes. So now we'll dive in at the individual grade level for our math data.
Okay, so this breaks down the math data for our K2 buildings. It's their progress towards typical and stretch growth. So overall, our K2 buildings demonstrated a higher median percentage of progress toward their annual typical growth in math than they did in reading. So K2 is demonstrating more proficiency. And when you think about what's being asked of them in math at K1 and 2, it's a little bit different than reading skills. The majority of the grade levels in K2 are also reflecting a median of about 50% progress or more towards their annual typical growth, which is expected. There's only 2 outliers that did not. And then the median progress toward the annual stretch growth is higher at K2 in math than it is in reading. So we're seeing in that median progress under stretch growth, a lot more percentages in the 40 range. Intermediate is a little bit of a change. At the intermediate grade levels, we see a lot more discrepancy in math performance and the median percentage of progress towards typical growth between each buildings than we did in reading. Reading, there was a lot more, the schools and grade levels were performing similar to each other, whereas in math, it's a lot more discrepant. Again, there's those considerations of the differences between the models that we'll need to keep an eye on. There's a 2-teacher dual model at Indian Hill, and then the singleton teachers at RLAS. As a result of some of the conversations that we've had and the data that we've observed, we did restart cross-district job-alike meetings so that those singleton teachers at RLAS truly have a PLC or a learning community that they can bounce ideas off of, lesson plan with, and share different resources with.
All right, continuing with our math data here now at the middle school level. Again, you can see that there is, when we're looking at those percentages for the median progress, there's discrepant performance observed between grades 6 and 7, with McGee performing 36, Round Lake Middle being at 43, and then McGee being in 7th grade at 31, and Round Lake Middle being at 50. There's definitely a difference between those two. And then when we look at our 8th grade median progress towards typical growth, McGee outperformed here with a 58%, whereas Round Lake Middle is sitting only at 25%. So really, again, diving into kind of what Casey's talking about, looking at individual teacher pieces, looking at what is going on in the PLCs to try to help understand how are we seeing the different discrepancies, because they have the exact same curriculum and resources. So just diving in more for us to really understand what's happening in the background with the data. So that wraps up the piece of the second and third pieces or types of data that Casey had talked about with that annual typical growth and stretch growth. So I will move on then just to some kind of key takeaways here, some of the strengths. We felt there's consistent percentage of students with improved placement in grades 3 through 8 for math, which is great to see when we're seeing some improvements in math. That has typically been an area where we struggle more. We're averaging 54% of the median percentage of progress toward annual typical growth in our K2 buildings, which is exciting. We're averaging 41% of our students that have already met their typical growth for the year in grades 3 through 8 for reading. Then overall increase in the percentage of annual median growth students make can be observed through grades K5, again in reading. And then finally, above a median progress toward annual typical growth in our 3-5 buildings in reading. So definitely some areas for growth that we want to look at are fostering the growth of students placing within that early on grade level, because I mentioned there's that linking study that really shows that those are the students that are going to be performing at that 4-5 level on IR. So how do we keep moving students into that range using the resources we have within iReady? For middle school, we want to be focusing on the amount of students that are placed in the 3 or more grade level below area, making sure, like I said, using branching minds, looking at our tier movement reports, that we're really on top of providing appropriate interventions for those students. At all grade levels, we want to have our cross-district PLC collaboration that supports those discrepancies and outliers. So if we have an underperforming 3rd grade section, let's figure out get to the bottom of that, work together. They're all of our kids when we're 3rd grade teachers, and really trying to foster that belief. Identifying students who have yet to make 50% of progress toward their annual typical growth and intervening is something we will want to focus on for sure. And finally, supporting students that already are making annual typical growth, but being intentional to support them and continuing to move them further. So that wraps up the iReady piece. So now I'm going to let you jump in if you have any more iReady questions. Okie doke. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jeff from the high school so we can speak a little bit to pre.
I got the rough time slot here, I think. Don't worry, it's not as long as that one. I promise to be brief with your time here. So first of all, this is our high school pre-ST data. I want to say first, thanks to the board for funding this test we gave kids in the fall. It's a big change for us to bring in this assessment, which is tiered directly to high school performance. So it's a big thing for our teams to have that data to look at to see where kids are at towards the ACT, our test in April, measures our performance as a school, and know where we lie right now to make changes based on that data going forward. So our 3-year SIP plan has our goal for the ACT being 20 overall, and that's the 2027 school year. So on the left-hand side, that's our pre-ACT data for the classes as currently stands. So freshmen 14.4, sophomores 14.5, juniors 15.5. The goal for this year is 17 for juniors, which then will get 18 next year and 20 the following after that a little bit. So breaking down by subsection, ACT has 4 main sections that it measures: reading, English, math, and science. So with our goal being 17, again, we're at 15.5 right now. An average rate of growth for a learner is 1.5 per year based on just class achievement alone. So if we can have that course content achievement on top of prep we're doing in the school day and outside of the school day, 15.5 to 17 is a realistic, actionable goal for our school this year. In the 4 subsections you have there, so English proficiency, our goal is 18%. On pre-ST, we're 22%. For math proficiency, our goal is 13%. On pre-ST, we're 14%. Those goals were taken by using past data from state report cards, and what will get you towards 3-year growth towards average. So we're trying to build towards that placement of 20 overall and average proficiency across schools in Illinois. The one difference is science, because science, we used to use the Illinois Science Assessment. It's a very content-specific science test. ACT science is more like reading science. So our kids aren't used to that as much, which is why you see a big dip from what our goal was, 35%, to their score 9%. So we're having to reframe instruction more like teaching how to read data modeling, how to interpret data charts, which we're doing that growth right now to try to better impact our growth in that area for the spring and going forward.
Okay, I got a quick question about percents. And you've got the composite score of 17. Do you have the composite scores for the English and the math too, or just the percents? Because I get a little confused here.
It's a good question. The hard part is that it breaks down by grade level, all the different scores. So you're going to have, for example, like a freshman reading is a 12.2 because pre-SAT 9 scored on a 1 to 30 range, pre-SAT 10, 11 to 1 to 35 range. So there's different scoring tiers based on the grades that they take it. So it's hard to say with the same score for every single one. But it's a very good question to ask, but why it's get so deep in the weeds for explaining the scores.
That makes sense. Okay.
So I look at this and I think that so from what I can tell is the pre-ACT 14% for math and 13 is where we want them to be, right? Then, so it seems like the one that's dragging everything down is science.
That's based on our goals. So because that's all based on state averages, our goals for proficiency achievement there. When you get into the actual weeds of what's bringing the score down, across the nation, the English section brings scores down. That's grammar rules. So most composite average for grammar is a 14, score 14 for English in the ACT. We were a 12.5 in English. And that's just being very much, because reading is your comprehension of literacy and text analysis. English is more just rules of function. So we're having to do that balance of, what you want English class to be. It can't be just everyday comma instruction. How do you blend the two things to meet the goals of the assessment, but also help kids grow as a learner overall with their language proficiency? So similar to iReady, we mailed home every score to families, grades 9, 10, 11, with communication on how to interpret the results in English and Spanish, as well as a sense of that report had their score by student per overall composite score and subsection score, and it gave them areas for improvement in all 4 subsections that all families received that. And our course teams worked on looking at that data to pick target areas for instruction this year for how we can work on one subsection in an area to help them grow. So for example, in science, we're focusing on data analysis. In English, it's, functions of usage of, punctuation to target growth to drive the movement up in the score this school year. On top of that, we're also building in this year ACT prep workshops in the school day. So we're gonna have 4 workshops in February and March for an hour and a half for all grades 9 and 11 learners that function each content area for 90 minutes. That covers test basics, the test content that's on it and how it's assessed and measured, some small practice, and then one 40-minute practice test on that section. And it's all scored right then and there, so kids will know what they got in that tool. And the tool we're going to use has 4 practice tests per section on it. So kids will take one, but will still also, if you want more practice, go to the same resource and take practice 2, 3, and 4 on your own time. My second and last slide, I promise you, is kind of on some other changes we had in the school that were kind of important changes that changed our culture of learning this year that you're, I think, aware of from our team. Want to follow up there on some data backing up what happened because of those changes. So the first one is some of our attendance and engagement issues for instruction. So in the first semester, we had an ADA, average daily attendance of 91%, which was fantastic. A lot of work with our attendance deans and processes in place to build that really helped our learners be more attentive in class. And then we had very minimal referrals for the cell phone policy. We've had kids have bought into that. We've heard from students and teachers alike that the cell phones being out of the room have had a dramatic increase on attention and focus, and more importantly, proficiency. And as a result of that, we've also seen with the formative assessments now being part of the gradebook, that students now are taking more seriously and driving them at a higher success rate of completion and proficiency success because it now means more in the gradebook. Where in the past, if formatives meant 0%, the effort level varied based on student learning because why give your best if it's not worth anything? A big growth for us is freshmen on track. So our goal as a school is 80%. Right now it's 80.5%, our highest in the last 5 years, which is a great sign of some of the changes we've had in the building to get that going forward. Something to highlight is even our off-track learners, there are 93 off-track learners. 37 of them are only 1 course off track, which means they're in the building passing 4 classes. They just need 1 more to be on track. So if you think every 5 kids is 1 percentage point, So if those 37 kids were on track and they're one class away, you'd be 88%. So we are making great strides to get to really high numbers, and only 4% of our kids are truly disengaged, meaning they pass 0 or 1 classes. So really some really good growth there in terms of freshmen on track and how we can kind of keep pushing for proficiency for those learners. And lastly, our big change was final assessments. Also, we went away from mastery exams, which were optional in the past, to now required final assessments in the first semester this school year. We had a 97% attendance rate on everyday finals when they're offered in December. We had a big worry about kids missing finals because of trips elsewhere or family reasons. We only had 86 kids miss for prearranged reasons to take tests early or late, and the parents could tell us that. We arranged that, and those finals were taken in time. We had more finals given and taken by kids in one period on the first day than all of last year first semester. That's roughly 1,700 finals taken in one time block and that day. So taking it is great, but what does it actually mean for proficiency? So in terms of the grades, at all grade levels, we saw similar or higher proficiency rates across every grade. We saw freshman track grow 4% after final exams. And I will say, just in terms of just actual qualitative things in the hallways, last year in the last day final assessment or master exams, I sat in the hallway and counted 31 kids in the building, 31 students. This year in the hallway, the last day, I watched hallways buzzing full of kids saying, I did so well in that test. How did you do? I did well in that fact too. Like, the energy and culture in the building was so much more vibrant by kids feeling like they had to complete the journey. And when they completed it, they felt proud of their success. So the proficiency is great. The movement is great, but just the sheer sense of like pride they had in their work and pride in doing what they want to do to be successful towards career and college pursuits was awesome to see. And I really believe that it had some great change for us in terms of that 1 week of final assessments, but more importantly about just the value of learning across the semester, what it means towards credit achievement and graduation for 4-year plans for our students. So thanks for supporting all these policies, really appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring up the ugly questions because
Go ahead.
I'm the ugly question person. Okay, so our average composite's 15.5, and I'm super excited that we have all these great things on track. The average composite score in Illinois is 24.5, so we got a lot of work to do to get there. What are we doing specifically for our kids who want to go to college when CLC is requiring a 17 in reading and a 22 in math, and our average composite is a 15.5? Because this is hurting our kids.
And that's the focus of this work, but we have to get more aligned to what these assessments are measuring. I think for many years we've not been aligned to what the assessments are doing to truly inform those instructions to help them reach those goals. I mean, you mentioned 15.5, 17 in the English area. We believe that goal will be met this year by our growth rates in terms of where we're at now, our focus instruction in ELA and across the curriculum, and by really focusing with our prep model, both in school and after school, on those areas of focus for our learners. Longer term, the 3-year plan, it is really working on curricular alignment to what ACT offers. And I think you've seen through Kate also some of the growth that they have had coming in. And a really big thing for us is, if you get into the weeds of it, freshman level for pre-ACT, you get a sense of like how many kids are close to benchmark, meaning they're less than 2 points away from being at the target. We're at 60% of our kids are near benchmark in 9th grade. So our belief is that, okay, if our kids in 9th grade are that close, with the right work in the next 2 years going forward, that they should get closer at target in 11th grade. So that's kind of our sense of like long term, like that's our key demographic is that group, because they're right there. We have to better work our curricular alignment and our focus instruction to not lose those kids, but instead bring them closer to the target to get what you're talking about. Because we totally agree. We see with Dr. Mendoza and our team, like the CLC rates, especially in math, are not strong. And we have to work from a K-12 work to get there. But when they get to us, take that work in the math curriculum, and next year we're working to bring it, as you know, as a board, to Algebra 1 curriculum, which has more resources for support for learners. And the ACT, about 3/4 of questions are algebra type questions. And so if we have Algebra 1 in 9th grade, and you have it spiraled again in 10th grade, and again Algebra 2 in 11th grade, you're bringing those parts more of the curriculum going forward. So when that test junior year of ACT, they've seen it much more frequently in their instruction, and we're successful with the test that they're going to face.
Can I ask a question to follow up, Ms. Larson? Just remind me, my brain gets mush with all this data. Isn't this the first year of the new ACT contract?
It is. So
Okay,
all the things
so-
you're hearing are like kind of approximations.
Yeah, so what I want to say is, and this isn't an excuse, but it's a reason. Part of the reason why, excuse me, the average ACT score is 24.5. The mandated test in Illinois was the SAT last year. So all the kids that took the ACT were taking it because they wanted to take it. So I'm just telling you that, and this isn't good, we need to do better, but when the ACT was the score that was used to determine our kind of whether or not we were on the naughty list, I think the average was 20, 21. So a very, very small percentage of Illinois students took the ACT last year, very, very small, because the mandated test was the SAT. So we need to keep shooting for that, and I think the one thing I'm really happy about is where you spend your time shows what your value is, and they are going full steam ahead with the ACT and the prep work. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. That's really, really important. Very, very small percentage of kids took the ACT in Illinois last year.
We attended workshops in the fall to do SAT, ACT comparisons of data that transferred over. That's where the 20 number came from. Taking the average of the state before and bringing it over to that number was the closest raw number they gave us was 20. But room to grow regardless.
And I definitely see with the freshmen where that's going to be on track. I just want to make sure we have enough or keep enough with the pre-ACT stuff going. I mean, I know our juniors, all the juniors in Illinois are just screwed this year. I mean, they just are, because we've been planning SAT their whole life, and now it's ACT for Illinois. But I want to make sure that our sophomores get as much possible prep as well. I don't want to forget them in this changeover as well. Hopefully they won't get as much as the freshmen, but hopefully they can get at least more than the juniors can.
And the board approved our Horizon Education contract last meeting as well, which is a big growth for us for kind of like our new tool for benchmarking in the fall for fall, winter, spring ACT stuff going forward. It's a big help for this project, so thank you for that.
I would just call out one other additional piece, Peg, in regards to specifically with curriculum, that we have, like Jeff mentioned, especially in our math data comparing to CLC, we have a particular class here referred to that's called Applied Math, and we are not seeing the success rates what we should see out of that class, because that class is designed to be specifically around the placement test at CLC. But what we've learned is the CLC placement test uses a particular platform that we are going to look to adopt for that course, so that the kids get practice within that testing platform that has an individual that is adaptive, similar to what we see in iReady. So if we are using the same tool that CLC is using to assess the kids, we're hoping that, like Jeff was speaking to, will provide those supports and instruction, and then also with a new math adoption. There's definitely a lot on the horizon for a lot of curricular pieces too to help support the work that both Jeff and Brian are leading at the high school.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions?
Just great work. I mean, it's a lot of information. Transferring from the MAP test, the iReady. I mean, I've had to have numerous discussions about, like, because for me personally, I want to be able to understand and be able to explain it. So, but again, board, if you want to meet with the team individually and just hear more, we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, moving on to the Red Rover system.
Good evening. We wanted to give you some information to provide us some feedback and some input on a major changeover in our department that we're considering. Of course, this will go through the normal finance process and then also the full board again. But because of the scope of this type of project, we wanted to do some analysis of what was out there, specifically our current program Frontline, which houses our hiring, as well as our absence management, which is basically running the substitute process, is very antiquated. It has been since the late 90s when Frontline came out. Around about the early 2000s is when they've made their last update. And in meeting with them and talking to them about the needs of a 21st century HR facilitation of this process, we had a wonderful rep who was very excited about some of the innovations I was looking to try to accomplish and some of the changes. And she was very excited to go back to her management and find out how we could move forward with this. And it turned out that none of it's going to happen. They're not interested in moving forward with any kind of change and basically shut that down. So what we do know is Red Rover is the only real competitor out there. Power School does have a process, though it is not as sophisticated and integrated as Red Rover's is. And this was through a variety of conversations with HR directors in the fall that I had that led me to Red Rover. So we wanted to highlight for you what Red Rover's about and just give you a general overview, a 50,000 foot view on this. Knowing that we've got many more pieces to put in place in terms of vetting this through the project management process, the finance committee, and so on. So I just wanted to make sure that we had kind of given you the context of that. But here's a couple of things that we wanted to mention tonight, why to switch over to Red Rover. And I'm not going to read through every single point, except to say that there's some really fascinating things for us as an HR department when we're trying to run 1,000+ employee grouping. The things that we need to be innovative are captured here in some of these things. So for the Red Rover features of the hiring part of the platform, a couple of things I just wanted to point out beyond the modern interface is an on-demand video interview platform, which is currently not in Frontline. We have to contract with Interview Stream to get that part in there. They already have it built in for no extra charge. And that's a helpful feature when we're thinking about candidates as we're starting to scale down to the final few. Also on here is an intuitive, when I talk about that modern interface, that candidate board, which allows the interview team to see where candidates are going. In fact, they can move them like chess pieces on a board. They can see the progression of this without having to wait for a variety of clicks from our department to show where it's going. They can literally move that board along the way with some appropriate making sure that not everything can just be done willy-nilly. There's some protocols in place for that. Those are just a couple of the things that we find really important in that process. And then the next one is the absence management platform on the next page, that next slide. One of the things we know is calling subs in this modern day and age is very antiquated. The fact that they can do text messaging to their phones with the rate cost of zero is huge. Frontline doesn't do that at this point at the scale that Red Rover does. As well as one of the other features I wanted to point out is the classroom coverage page. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody was moving the slides. My apologies. We'll wait until that gets there. It's the next slide. Thank you, Jeff. One of the other features is that classroom information page for subs. Often substitutes walk in and they don't know necessarily what's always going on. There might be sub-plans listed in the listing that they choose, but this one has an interface for them to know far more information than just the daily plans. It will give them maps of the school, maps of their classroom, who to contact there. It's a beautiful modern interface for those subs to know exactly what's expected of them throughout their entire day and where they can go and what contacts that they have. So just a couple of those features for you to think about as you're giving us some input on this. And that's really the why switch to those two platforms. It's equal in terms of what they offer hiring and absence, but their ability to be much more innovative and fresh and modern and capture the needs of what's happening in hiring and absence management is far superior. So I didn't want you to just take my word on it. We did do a demo. We did talk to them extensively, but I also reached out to several districts who are currently using Red Rover. This is not all the districts and certainly not all in our conference. I will be reaching out to ask those in our conference that are not on there if they're considering Red Rover, if they're happy with their frontline platform, those types of questions. But I wanted to get a feel for, is this really as good as we think it is? And overwhelmingly, as you look through some of the comments, there's a couple slides for the hiring package, and the districts are listed there. There's a couple of slides for the absence management, and that's delineated separately there. So there's the first 3 slides are hiring. The next couple slides are absence management. You can see on there ultimately what they're saying about it. And while there are minor issues, the one thing that they all are saying about it is that these people listen. And we've found that to be the case. Every time I ask a question of the company, they immediately are responding to everything that I need. Clearly, they are invested in the process of listening to their customers. They have a refresh every 8 to 10 weeks based on that feedback. They add new features in that time frame. Frontline is not willing to do all of that. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that final slide where it says reviews for final thoughts. I did ask them, each one of those districts, to give, what's your overall impression of, or is there anything else that you think we need to know that would benefit us? And if you look there, almost everybody, and in fact, Stevenson had said, run, don't walk to Red Rover. I mean, they literally love this platform. There's very little problem, and the problems that do exist, they're listening to them. It's important to note that all or many of the sales associates and leaders of Red Rover are what I call refugees from Frontline. They all work there, and they all were as disappointed as we are, and they're committed to this process. So we were very impressed by the process that we've gone through so far. We want to vet this out, of course. We are working on that piece now. It's also important for you to know what the cost breakdown is, which of course we'll vet further into the Finance Committee. But I wanted to make sure that you had a clear sense of, is this comparable? Are we going to pay a ton more? What does that look like? And you can see that we're actually going to pay $2,000 less, which is lovely and good for our base of for our taxpayers and all of that. But it's also important to note that the value is as high as Frontline, and we're getting more for it. We're actually getting customer service for that. It does talk about how they come to their pricing for both places, as well as what it would be an implementation fee to move over, which is pretty standard for companies when you're doing an implementation process, but that's a one-time fee. Just some general information about the program. The program. It's been in business since January 2020. They launched just right before COVID, and still got over 1,400 districts, and they're expanding every month. They're working with plenty of Lake County people, and I'm looking to investigate how many more they're getting on board, and certainly talk with our neighbors as well. It's one of the fastest growing companies because of that. Many staff members, as I said, worked for or experienced Frontline themselves. So we just wanted to give you a preview of what we're kind of thinking about. And again, when it comes back, you're not surprised, like what is Red Rover, but just to give you a sense of we're really trying to move in that progressive direction in the department and really become innovative, but also integrated and automated as well. Any questions?
Any questions?
I have some.
Okay.
All right, so I know currently we have Frontline, obviously. And we use the K-12 job spot to post our jobs. And they don't support Red Rover, so how will we post our positions?
That's correct. They don't support K-12 Job Spot because K-12 Job Spot is a frontline product in a sense, so we can't get there. But we can also promote on all of the other things that we do, like Indeed. We can promote on the regional website. We can promote on IASA. We can promote on all the other platforms that are out there, as well as our virtual job boards and our virtual recruitment places as well.
So how much do we use the K-12 job spots for postings?
We use it every time because it's built into Frontline, but we're running a final report out of there. We're having problems with Frontline getting that information, but we are trying to run a full report on how many staff members we've hired that would have checked K-12 job spot as one of the options.
And we can get that information back to the board, right? If we get it.
We will get it. It's just we have to do quite a few things to pull it into an understandable format.
So the current contract with Frontline ends June 30th. How quick are we moving for implementation? Because I would think we'd want to do it before June 30th.
Our hope is to have everything in place if we go this direction. And again, we're still vetting that out, but assuming we go in this direction, we would have everything already transferred into Red Rover before July 1st, so that when the official contract starts, we're there and we would be able to sunset the other one.
Okay, I'm definitely interested in the data from K-12 on our postings.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope. Thank you. Dr. King, it appears we're getting rid of some stuff.
So this is our typical disposal. So this is the last 2 months, straight disposal, typical things that are expired, outdated, things that we're not using anymore, that we could not actually sell and or donate anywhere.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the FOIA report? Any questions with the contracts less than 1,000 report? All right, moving on to opportunities for public comment. Members of the public may participate in public comment during regular board meetings by attending in person or by submitting an electronic public comment form. Please note speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Public comments will be accepted until noon the day of the scheduled regular meeting. The public commenter will be contacted to confirm identity. Once confirmed, the electronic public comment will be provided to all board members in written form. We have no public here for public comment. Is there any electronic public comment? No, we have no electronic public comment. So nobody loves us. We have no public comment today. Moving on to Dr. Mendoza's superintendent's report.
Thank you, Vice President Larson and Board of Education. During our mid-year check-in with School Links, the account rep reviewed our usage and implementation data. We are in the top 25% nationally of students with reported areas of career interest and who have used School Links to begin to plan their post-secondary life. The upper 25% of schools have at least 78% of students engaging in this tool. Round Lake is at 83%. This month, teachers at the K-5 level will be completing surveys intended to provide details on how the new curriculum for math and English language arts, Spanish language arts, and social emotional learning have gone so far this school year. Responses to these surveys will provide important information on how to best to support teachers going forward. This survey is scheduled as follows. The week of February 3rd is for math and social emotional learning. The week of February 10th for English language arts, and the week of February 16th, Spanish language arts. Below is a recently received donation. We are notifying the board in compliance with board policy. A thank you letter will be sent from the district to the donor. 2 bins of supplies, office supplies, were donated by Robert Half to Beach School. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. And we are on to our committee reports. Do we have a report tonight?
We do, in fact, have a report. Excuse me. I'm struggling with some issues today, so bear with me. But yes, we met today earlier, and we had a couple of hot ticket items that we discussed. One of them was our chronic absenteeism. We have a stakeholder advisory group meeting coming up, actually next Monday, and what that's going to do is just basically address some of our chronic absenteeism. Overall, I'd like to point out that year over year we've seen a reduction, so I want to highlight that. But we're kind of just trying to identify the root cause of it. So if you look in the packet, they kind of go over some of the data relating to it, and there's some explanation about the data. So if you get a chance, look at that. Excuse me. And then it kind of reviews over how it's sort of dropped. But we discussed some of the incentives that they have done. So far they've done like incentives to have the children come to school, monthly brag tags, for example, recognition for attendance improvement at assemblies, things like that. They also have had communications that they've shared, that they've written up. And we talked about how the students and the parents seem to like to hear from the leaders at the school. So that seems to have helped also. Next Monday when we meet, there's a couple of questions that we're going to be asking our stakeholders. I believe that they said that there was approximately 70 people slated to come, kind of in that range. Question 1 is going to be, in your opinion, what factors are contributing to students missing school? Question 2 will be, what strategies could be used to address those issues? And question 3, what more could be done to encourage regular attendance among students and families? And then 4 is, how can the school better engage parents in understanding the importance of regular attendance and encouraging their children to attend school every day? So we'll be discussing that as a group with these parents and people from the community to just kind of get idea, and then deconstructing what we identify as things that they bring up. Any questions on that? Anything you guys want to add? No? Okay. The next thing we talked about, if I go back to the agenda, was the elementary teachers communication tool, standard operating procedures. We were fortunate enough to have Annette Negrete McGinley go to all of the open houses this year, beginning of this year, and she identified some areas of opportunities that we had for consistency. So they developed these as sort of a response to that. If you open up the packet and look at it, let me pull up my notes really quick. They talked about kind of streamlining the operating procedures. They'll have a QR code per kid. They'll receive that code, and then at the end of the year, the teachers will remove the children from that. That'll be part of their end of year requirements, and then the principals will be required to go in and kind of review that over. So there is checks and balances in that. It's one of their checklists. Also, the points, the JoJo points have been standardized. So there was some concerns about that because there was not an alignment on that. So they brought that into alignment. And then if the parents are not able to come to the open house, we agreed that they would backpack the QR code home because that seems to be one of our more effective ways of communication. And then if they still need it, then they can email, and then at that point it would be kind of a one-off situation. We were having there was an issue with email communication with that, so they're addressing that. But overall, I was really delighted with the operating procedures. I thought it brings some consistency to it, and I think it makes it easier for the parents in general. But that's really kind of the wrap up of that. Anything you want to add? Okay. And then the last thing, if you look at the agenda, was our monthly information snapshot. If you pull that up, you'll see there's my computer is frozen, so that's fun. Oh, here it goes. You'll see the kind of review of upcoming events. I did want to highlight on the 24th of February that we have a board meeting that night, but also Mano is hosting, what is it? It's called? But no, you're right. Yes. They're going to be doing a virtual one February 10th, and then they're having one in person at McGee Middle School on the 24th. So Julie and I will be attending that and then coming here. But I did want to highlight that I'm just delighted to be partnering with them. I think they're a great organization that helps our community. And then if you have any questions on the snapshots of social analytics or anything, let me know. But overall, it was a really good meeting. Anything else you guys want to add? No? Okay. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And Mrs. McGinley, you want to approve some open meeting minutes?
Yep. Need a motion to approve the minutes of the January 27th, 2025 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. De Vera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negrete McGinley?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for the following items. The accounts payable report for $661,512.74. The February 3rd, 2025 employment report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. De Vera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee? Yes. Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negrete McGinley?
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to new business. Which takes us to the gym sound system.
Good evening. The proposal in front of you this evening for your review and approval is a culmination of extensive work performed by our AV specialist, Christine Kenyon. Christine partnered with our elementary building administrators, our TNL stakeholders, as well as our grant manager and AV partners. The proposal is for sound systems for each of our 5 elementary buildings, totaling $296,903, of which we currently have approval from Title I of $207,887, covering equipment and shipping, leaving the district with $89,016. Upon additional conversations with our grant manager and TNL, they believe the Title I grant will also cover the $16,980 3-year warranty costs. If that is approved, that will leave the district with a total cost of $72,036 to fund this project, and Title I will pick up $224,867 in total cost. If approved, Christine has also confirmed that the vendor will be able to start right after Memorial Day and finish within the June 30th grant deadline for all 5 elementary buildings. One other thing I'd like to note is we currently have 3 buildings that have projector solutions, Beach, Ellis, and Murphy. So they will not be getting projection as they already have it, but Indian Hill Village will receive projection as part of the sound system upgrades as well. Any questions?
No questions, but if I could add, this has been vetted through the Finance Committee and is in support of it. And thank you, Mr. Kozak, for mentioning about the projection.
You're welcome. Thank you, Annette.
All right, I need a motion to approve the Advent Solutions proposal totaling $296,903.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negrete McGinley?
Yes.
Motion carries. And we are on to staffing.
Good evening again. This was brought to the board last week as a finance committee and a request for the anticipated positions being posted. We're just bringing it now to finalize it with the board approval tonight for the crossing guard, safety assistant position, as well as the AP position in the business office.
No questions?
No, and again, just to add that it has gone through Finance Committee. With that, I need a motion to approve the decrease in personal inventory of 0.5 FTE crossing guard, an increase in personal inventory of 0.5 FTE crossing guard safety assistant, and 1.0 FTE business office accounts payable secretary.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negrete McGinley?
Yes.
And with that, motion carries. And we move on to the middle school new club proposals.
Hello and good evening. What you have before you is a proposal to add some additional clubs at Round Lake Middle School and McGee Middle School. As we try to continue to offer more engagement opportunities for our students and better align what is happening at all 3 levels, we have been approached, or I have been approached, by adding these clubs, which we do offer at the high school, at Round Lake Middle School and McGee. They are it's like a weightlifting club, which would mirror the Panther Health and Wellness Club that is here at the high school, to give our students opportunities for conditioning and strength and wellness, that will also utilize the beautiful new weight rooms that are now at both of those buildings, and also a jazz band at McGee Middle School. All of these are pilots for this, would be pilots for this semester, and then we would, I know there was a question about possibly, and we would be looking to expand the jazz band to Round Lake Middle School. We have high interest at McGee right now, though, so we want to capitalize on that at this time.
Just a quick question on the McGee. Maternity leave?
Yeah, so the teacher was on maternity leave, so they did not put a.
So they just didn't.
They just didn't have a sponsor for the club until the teacher comes back.
Oh, so they just don't do it. Oh,
correct.
Okay. Thank you. And does Round Lake Middle have jazz club or jazz band as well?
Not yet. There's a high interest at McGee. The students actually approached the teacher about it too. So we wanted to start there, see how it started, see how it went, and then if it is successful, then we would look to expand to Round Lake Middle School.
Okay.
In the future.
Just curious. Thank you.
No other questions?
Oh, I was just going to add, I know Ms. Klingler asked about Round Lake Middle and the jazz band. Those are questions also vetted through finance because, again, we want to make sure there is equity in both the middle schools and club offering. And I know administration says they will keep monitoring that.
Yes, we will. Absolutely.
I need a motion to approve the middle school club's jazz band at John T. McGee Middle School and Health and Wellness Club at John T. McGee Middle School and Round Lake Middle School at a cost of $2,040.69.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mrs. Negretti McGinley.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to prom and a little scene contract.
Excuse me. What you have before you is the first of two prom contracts that we are going to be presenting. This first one is a little scene. Those are the flip books that the students really love and enjoy to capture their prom memories. So that is the first contract before you.
Questions?
Again, if I can just add for both the Little Scene and Pixter contract there is next. Those are both vetted through finance, just reviewing the contract and then also asking and bringing outside vendors as the high school will have a new venue for prom. So that's all been vetted through finance. If I can have a motion to approve the A Little Scene contract in the amount of $3,850.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Can I have a roll call?
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mrs. Negretti McGinley.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to the Pixter contract.
So the Pixter contract is for the 360 camera that we started using, I believe it was 2 years ago or 1 year ago. Another huge hit with the students. If you think about it, it's like the glam bot for all of the awards things that are happening now. And again, a huge hit with the students, and they really enjoy getting their like glam bot moment when they're all dressed up.
All right. Any questions?
I need a motion to approve the Pixter contract for $1,895.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mrs. Negretti McGinley.
Yes.
Motion carries. On to our long-range enrollment projection study.
Good evening. Administration respectfully requests the Board of Education to approve a long-range enrollment projection study with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Applied Population Laboratory. So the last time we did an enrollment projection study was 2021, and they do a 5-year and 10-year projection. The farther we get from that study, the less reliable that that data becomes. And currently, we are trending about 600 students above the projections. So we're looking to do an updated projection. It will also take into account the new structure of partner schools at the elementary level. And this request will result in expenditures in $8,100 and would be budgeted to district funds. Any questions?
So we're doing a 10-year?
Yes, it's a 10-year trend. So they give us a 5-year and 10-year trend. Now that 5-year is typically the most accurate, but it is a 10-year trend.
Do we pay more for a 10-year or it's just part of the package?
It's part of the package. It's like the standard offering.
Because I'm thinking 5 years from now, we're probably gonna.
All right, take it away.
I just wanted to add that this has gone through finance as well and reviewed. And this is similar to the previous agreements we've done with University of Wisconsin-Madison. Therefore, I need a motion to approve this service agreement with the Applied Population Laboratory at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the amount of $8,100.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Lee. Can I have a roll call?
Mr. De Vera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negretti McGinley?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
And we're on to our administrative procedure.
So the next item is not one that you typically see as a Board of Education. We don't ask that you approve administrative procedures, but given the complexity of what this is dealing with, we thought it would be most appropriate to do that. So before you is an administrative procedure called Immigration Enforcement Interviews and Records Request. And what this document does is help guide staff in the event that we do indeed receive requests for interviews from ICE related to immigration enforcement in our schools. So I do want to say, and I've mentioned this in I think multiple communications to staff and to the board and to staff so far, families, board and staff, that we have received no information that we anticipate that there will be any of such requests coming to our schools. However, we thought it would be prudent to work with our attorneys to make sure that we have something in place should something change in the future. So it's all outlined here in the memo. It really is guiding us and making sure that we have appropriate documentation should we receive such requests, that we follow appropriate student interview procedures, and also the process for sharing student records if a request does come through. So also just want to call out, we've been working with mano a mano every step of the way since these new rules and guidance have been released. And they've been a tremendous partner, and really it's every day, every other day that they're checking in just to see how we're doing, how they can support, and we will continue to refer any of our families or staff who have concerns about this topic to them for additional guidance. So any questions?
I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to do this.
So I think it's not normal. I'm presenting it tonight also asking for approval, given the timing we thought, and not normally asking you to approve such things, so that we would respectfully ask for your approval of it this evening.
I need a motion to approve the 7-150 Administrative Procedure 2, Immigration Enforcement Interviews and Records Request.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Ms. Lee. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. De Vera?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negretti McGinley?
Yes.
Motion carries. On to positive occurrences.
I have one. Okay. So, I don't know if you guys saw the email that Bobby Olson sent us, but the Panther Voices went to the Illinois Music Education Conference. and they had like a preview show the few days before they went. And so my daughter Abigail and I went, and it was just a beautiful experience. The parents were there. The kids sing so beautifully, and all of the music that was selected, which was selected a while ago, was just really, I think, just beautiful. It was very touching. It was about, you know, like love and kindness and compassion and being together as community, and I just thought it was just so good. So I just wanted to highlight that because those kids really sing, I feel like, at a professional level. And Bobby Olson is such a caring person. The other thing I wanted to highlight was one of the student teachers is Joanna Wynn, and she's our student that came from our music program, and she was actually a drum major, and she's currently studying musical education. But it's just so lovely to see our children come back and want to be in an educational capacity. So I just wanted to highlight that.
I just wanted to throw out there, it is National School Counselor Week. So for any of y'all who celebrate your counselors, no, not me. Social Worker Week's coming up in March. No. This is for all the counselors that are out there that are working with all of our kids and keeping them on track and getting them on track and getting them across the finish line, kicking and screaming if they have to. They're awesome and they do a great job. So kudos to them. Anybody, anything else? Mrs. McGinley, anything on that end?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Any future agenda items for anybody? Going once, going twice. All right, we are going to go in. I need a motion to go into convene in closed session as permitted by statute 5 ILCS 120/2 for the purpose of discussing the following: employment matters 5 ILCS 120/2 C1, litigation 5 ILCS 120/2 C11, and closed meeting minutes 5 ILCS 120/2 C21.
So
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Tavera?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
Mrs. Negrete McGinley?
Yes.
Motion carries. We're going to go into closed session, so good night, everybody. Bye.